I'm kind of angry today and just a little bit frustrated. And I want to talk about why. Because something huge just clicked into place for me. And I just cannot believe that nobody is talking about this. Because I've read hundreds of books on spirituality and I've watched thousands of hours of videos on teachings and channelings. And I've spent years, in fact, over 2 decades, learning everything I could about spiritual methodologies, mindset. And in all of that time, nobody has mentioned this. Not once. And I honestly don't understand how it is possible that this isn't common knowledge. How have we all missed this? We talk all the time in the spiritual world about how we create our own reality. There are whole libraries written about the universal laws, especially about the law of mind, the concept that all is mind. But somehow, even with all of that, no one has actually truly understood and gotten to the core truth of how we actually create our reality. And that's why I'm angry. Because now that I finally figured it out, I'm angry that it took me this long. Why didn't anyone tell me this? Why isn't this part of the conversation? Why doesn't anybody know this? Or did somebody actually figure it out and it's just been hidden from us? So please share this to as many people as you can because people need to know about this. What is this? What am I talking about? I'm talking about the difference between the subconscious and the unconscious, and how the unconscious is the actual mechanism that creates our reality. The subconscious is not the unconscious. They are not the same thing. People will always use these terms interchangeably, but that's just not correct. So we all know that your thoughts create your reality, and we all know that that's not our conscious thoughts. So we all know that. And so the next logical jump must be it must therefore be the subconscious, because the conscious is just 5% of our thoughts and the subconscious is the 95. And that is the mistake. I say that, and I'm trained in subconscious work. I've studied it deeply. I'm a certified rapid transformational therapist with that trained under Marissa Peer, a modality that's won all sorts of awards about shifting the subconscious. And while it helped me feel better, it didn't actually change my reality. And I don't know about you, but I'm not just here to just feel better anymore. I'm here to create. My soul is telling me that there's new things possible for me, and I want that. I want that life that I feel so deeply is available to me. So if the subconscious work isn't creating shifts in your outer world, it's just not enough anymore. It's just a band-aid on a gaping wound. We think, well, I feel better, so I must be healing. But if nothing ever changes in your outer reality, that's just not okay. We're just not here to feel better. We're creator beings. We're here to create the life that we want. And now, finally, I understand why so many of us haven't been able to do just that. Because we've been working with the wrong layer of the mind. And unless you understand how the unconscious works, you're going to keep running into those brick walls over and over and over again. And you're not going to know why, because you're going to say, but I've healed that. And that's why people keep talking about going in a spiral, having to heal the same thing over and over again. But that's not true. So there is a pattern in my life that I've been working for probably the last 3 years now to heal. And instead of continuing to ask the same question of what do I need to heal from the outside in, and how do I deconstruct this thing, I actually started to ask the question, why is this thing here in the first place? What is the idea, the construct that makes me think there is even something that needs to be fixed? Because remember, underneath every repeating pattern in your life, there is a construct, like the hidden rules of how life should work. And that construct sits in the unconscious. So I took that issue that I've been working so hard on healing. And instead of trying to fix it from the outside in, I instead asked, what is holding this in place? What is the foundation that makes this an issue? And as I was digging into that, it led me back to an experience that I had when I was 10 years old. So I grew up in South Africa, and at the age of 10, all kids in the country would take part in a national IQ test. And the people who scored in the top 5% of that test would be invited to attend this special extracurricular school for highly gifted children. And this school was amazing. You got to learn all sorts of really cool things that they just didn't teach you in normal school. And when I was 6, my sister, who's 4 years older than me, and who I always saw as this little golden child, blonde hair, green eyes, she did everything perfectly. When she took the test and got invited, and I saw what she got to learn at the school, I was so envious. Not from a place of negativity, but just because I wanted it so badly. That school looked so good, and it shows you what a geek I am. I loved what they were learning. I wanted to go so badly. So when it came time for me to do my test, when I reached age 10, I was so determined to get in. I don't actually remember taking the test, but I remember before the test thinking, I have to focus because I had to get in. I had to. And so when those test results came in, and I actually got a letter inviting me to the school, I remember running to my mother after school when she came to pick me up, and I was waving that letter and I was saying, look what I got. I got the same thing as my sister. And that moment, it should have been a triumphant moment. On the surface, it looked like I got everything that I wanted. This is where an unconscious construct was formed. And this just shows you how insidious the unconscious is. Because I've gone to that moment in some of my hypnosis sessions over the years, but all that it framed it as was that I just wanted to be as good as my sister, or that I was trying to prove that I was worthy. And sure, that makes sense because unworthiness is my sole theme for this life. It is my karma. It is about overcoming unworthiness. But that wasn't the whole story. Because the real thing that happened that day wasn't about worth. Sure, at the subconscious level, it was reinforcing that story, but there was a whole different thing that was being created at the unconscious level in that moment. And that unconscious is where I created a whole new rule for life. I created an entire model of how you get what you want. And that model said, what you're allowed to have, your manifestation, is actually based on somebody else's authority. Because even though I got what I wanted, it didn't come from my inner choice. I had to be selected. I had to meet a certain standard, a threshold, and then wait to be chosen. So the rule my unconscious created was, if I really, really, really want something, I can't actually choose it. I have to wait until I could meet the requirements before I could be picked. And so from that point on, every major desire that I had, doesn't matter what it was filtered through that rule because the unconscious runs the rules for life. So I couldn't claim what I wanted. no matter what it was, I had to prove myself first, then maybe somebody else would allow me to have it. But only if I met the standards that they set. So that wonderful rule, that operating system that I put into place, has now been shaping my life for nearly 40 years. And I didn't see it. And if I hadn't asked the question, who knows if I ever would have found it? Because that's the whole point. You can't find this in the subconscious. There's no trauma, there's no story wrapped around it, nothing was physically wrong. It was a positive memory. I actually got what I wanted. That thing I was so desperate for, I got. So why would I try to heal that? But that's exactly where the unconscious lives. In those constructs that make up those invisible rules that we have put around our reality. And those rules continue to then shape our entire life, especially when it comes to manifestation. And if those rules go against how your soul is meant to operate, this is where distortion comes in into manifestation. Because my soul is all about freedom and choice. But my rule said, if I really want something deeply, first of all, I must wait for it. I must be perfect. And even then, I don't actually get to choose because somebody else must allow it. So that's the system I've been trying to win in for decades. So it doesn't matter how many healing modalities you use, no matter how much mindset work, it's not going to shift because it's not working on the right layer. And that's why I'm angry and frustrated, because nobody talks about this. Nobody tells you that it's not your subconscious that creates your reality, that it's really your unconscious. The part of you that creates the rules of the game without you even knowing that you are playing a game. Now, I've spent the last 9 months working on investigating, understanding, digging into the unconscious, and every single day that I see more of it, I get more and more convinced that this is it. This is the missing link that actually creates our reality. So we need to understand this. The spiritual community needs to talk about this. And if somebody still tells you that your subconscious creates your reality, then you can just lovingly correct them and tell them that's not the full picture. Because I know for sure that that's not true anymore. What we need now is deeper knowledge of how the unconscious works. We need to understand it. We need to be able to access it for ourselves, because that's where reality begins. And more people need to know about this. So please share this to anyone that you think might benefit from this. This is so important that we need to be able to start accessing the unconscious in new ways, because I know that from the work that I've done with my clients in the last 9 months, this absolutely shifts reality. When we find what is holding us back, the rules that we have built around reality that is incorrect and incompatible to how our souls work, that's where everything starts to shift.